What is up, sports fans? What is up, Mariners fans? Yikes. What a weekend for your Seattle Mariners. Kind of got to call it the good, the bad, and the ugly. That's the theme I think I'm coming up with for today's episode of Bleav In Mariners. A lot happened over the weekend, and most of it not really that good down in Peoria. It's always fun. Every single year I come into spring training with that optimism. I'm always excited about what the Mariners can do for a new season. It's especially through some pretty down years, some dog days here in Seattle, kind of some lesser storylines to focus on, like the success of Felix Hernandez or like will Kyle Seager have a good season, not really thinking that they're going to make the playoffs. But, it's kind of been nice the last few seasons coming into spring training with the hope that maybe they can get there. But just feels like that optimism is kind of crushed with all these different stories that have been happening through spring training. And I've really, really had to try hard to look for that optimism, rooting for a team that refuses to spend money on the necessary tools to put themselves in contention to win a World Series, that they refuse to put a GM out there that doesn't want to keep his mouth shut, or a president, I guess I should say, because, Justin Hollander's the GM, but he's really the right-hand man of President Jerry Dipoto, running all the shots here in Seattle. And God, we already have an injury to deal with in spring training. How can I be positive about this? I'm trying to find the optimism, but this pitching staff's already being counted on too much. Just keeps bringing me down, man. Just keeps bringing me down. Help me out, Mariners fans. Welcome on into the latest episode of Bleav In Mariners. I'm Jordon Schultz, more affectionately known as Schultzy, a Pacific Northwest talk show host from Portland, Oregon. I've got a couple positive notes to highlight for the Mariners' last couple spring training games. So we do have some good here. I did mention the theme, the good, the bad, and the ugly. We do have some good here, but I've got to dive into some bad news after that. First, George Kirby going down for an extended period of time, not too long, but more like maybe 3 weeks to a month at this point. I mean, it's March 10th taping this episode, but we're possibly looking at the Mariners missing him at the start of the regular season and going a little bit past that, but not too far past that. So we'll get into that as well. Definitely not the worst news, but definitely not good news. I would consider that bad news. And then Jerry Dipoto, his comments again to the media and how he can defend himself and talk about why he's smarter than everybody else and infuriate Mariners fans. Again, we'll dive into what he told The Athletic last Thursday. But before we do that, let's start with the good. I'm taping this episode Monday, March 10th, and Mitch Garver, goodness gracious, good for him. Nice to see he hit another home run, a 2-run bomb on a laser in the Mariners' 7-5 loss to the Brewers. So nice performance from Garv Sauce. Love to see him raking. Looks like he's still hitting about 444 for spring. And I mean, after what we saw last season, I think we can start to maybe it's spring training, right? But if he's consistently hitting now 2-3 weeks into spring training, I think that we can maybe start to truly believe that we're going to see that odd year Garv Sauce raking in, right? I do believe it. I'm praying for it. I think the baseball gods are going to answer my prayers. But really, it's not just Mitch Garver. It's the Mitch Witch that has been succeeding in spring training. But nice to see Mitch Garver getting another home run. He did leave after getting hit on the hand with a pitch. So hopefully the injury isn't too serious there, because really the Mariners need him to play if he's going to be hitting well. And him and Mitch Garver, I truly believe, are integral to the success of Seattle in 2025. And at this point, Garv Sauce hitting 444. At least one of these ifs that the Mariners have been pinning their hopes on might be panning out in their favor, but it is still spring. And once again, hopefully that injury is not too bad. But good to see Garver hitting another bomb. And yeah, if Mitch Witch can hit their weight in 2025, the Mariners will win the AL West. Mark my words. It's a hot take. It's a hot prediction, but so nice to see Garver hitting well. And I believe that if that continues into the regular season, especially with him and Mitch Haniger, that the Mariners are going to do very well. Also, young second baseman Ryan Bliss, he's been playing his booty off this spring. That position, of course, the biggest question mark for Seattle right now. I do think that they need to give Bliss the starting job like immediately. I think they should have handed it to him at the beginning of spring training. Like, Get this kid at bats yesterday. He's had such a good spring, 7 for 20, so 350 batting average, and that actually included a hit on Monday against the Brewers. It's stolen base in that game as well, has 2 RBIs, has a couple of hard hit balls. I mean, I haven't seen him hit anything over the wall yet, but the thing about Ryan Bliss is he's fast and he hits it to all fields. So loves to use that speed on the base paths. He's been working out at third base, so he's shown a little bit of versatility. Get this kid on the Mariners. Love to see him succeeding. I do think that Dylan Moore, as the Mariners have said publicly, that they want him to be their utility guy. That I think that Dylan Moore would be a much better super utility role person for the Mariners as opposed to him playing second base every day, taking away at bats from Ryan Bliss. And nice also to see on the other side of that equation, Jorge Polanco. He had a 2-for-2 day as well on Monday while playing third base. Looking like he's starting to settle in. How about that? Mariners fans, including myself, are looking at him like a freaking hawk. All right, we're all waiting to see if something happens because this is the man that the Mariners spent the most offseason money on. So sad to say that, but it's true. But if he flails, you got Ben Williamson. You got Leo Rivas, and we talked about Ben Williamson on the last episode or 2 episodes ago on Bleav In Mariners. Go back and listen to, I believe it was episode 22. Ben Williamson will be ready to get at bats. I'm sure he's going to start the season in Tacoma, but I would not be shocked if we saw Williamson in 2025 in Seattle, especially if Polanco struggles a bit to start out the year. But hey, we're seeing him looking like he's getting settled in. He's looking pretty free, pretty loose, like most of this team has looked so far this spring. So nice to see Jorge Polanco have that 2-for-2 day. Raises his average up to over 230. Would like to actually see him hitting like 240 this year, right? I mean, God, that's kind of sad that's what we're asking for. But 240, 15 home runs, and playing decent third base, I'll take it. And nice to see him getting a couple of hits on Monday as well as over the weekend and playing in the field after that knee surgery, finally showing that he is reportedly healthy. So good to see that. All right. Cleanse the palate with a couple of good things from spring training. Now let's get into the bad. First, we got to talk about George Kirby. He unfortunately is going to start the season on the injured list because of some inflammation in his right shoulder. GM Justin Hollander says he's structurally okay, but they're shutting him down basically as a precaution. Like I said earlier, it's not great news, but certainly isn't the worst news in the world either. I would call it bad news. I don't think that losing one of your studs, a guy that's basically, the best, I would say, best strikeout pitcher, one of them in the major leagues, and never walks, guys. George Kirby is just so good at pounding the strike zone. And I would say out of him and Logan Gilbert, it's like take your pick as far as like what guy's going to be the future ace of the Seattle Mariners, because they're both getting a bag, probably close to $200 million or more. But yeah, and on top of that, when you got that elite pitching staff that you're leaning on without adding any hitters in the offseason, makes it a little harder for the Mariners to deal with George Kirby going down. But I will say it's been kind of a rough spring for the starters overall. If you're not Brian Wu, Luis Castillo, I think he's only struck out like 3 or 4 guys in 8 innings. Logan Gilbert, Logan Gilbert and Bryce Miller both saddled with ERAs over 6. It's not looking good if you're a starting pitcher in spring training, but this was a really good rotation last year, so you believe that they're going to be good again. But, it's funny. I don't want to get like too high up on like these Mitch Garver numbers while also like saying like, well, these low pitching numbers don't necessarily mean much, because if I'm doing that, I'm sounding like a hypocrite, right? I can't say that Mitch Garver's numbers mean a lot while these pitchers' numbers mean nothing. If Bryce Miller and Logan Gilbert are struggling, yeah, that's going to be a problem. But once again, spring training, maybe they're just getting the cobwebs out still. But I mean, it's so hard to tell if guys are going to be like hitting once, spring training is over after they've been hitting, or if they all of a sudden have been pitching terribly. And then just once opening day hits, something clicks, or, a week into the season, something clicks. They're okay. But this rotation gives you confidence that they're going to do that, right? It's literally the best one in baseball in multiple categories: ERA, innings, whip, damn near the top in strikeouts as well. But how does George Kirby not being on the opening day roster affect their rotation? So essentially, you got to call up that fourth, 6th man of the rotation, Emerson Hancock. We've all seen him. He's going to be stepping in, and we know that for sure because the Mariners have said publicly they will not be seeking outside help. That's actually according to Zachary Reimer from Soto Mojo, was where I read that, but the Mariners did say that out loud. And go check out Soto Mojo, by the way, if you haven't. They do some really good coverage of the Mariners. The Mariners just really don't think that Kirby's going to be out that long after opening day, March 27th. Actually, another great point from an article by Zachary Reimer for Soto Mojo, talking about shoulder inflammation can sideline pitchers for, up to a couple of months. But last year, the Baltimore Orioles had a couple of cases, and Grayson Rodriguez and Zach Eflin, which that only cost them about 2 weeks. It was a shoulder inflammation injury, and they were able to get back pretty quick. And once again, Justin Hollander is saying that this is an abundance of caution, what the Mariners are doing here. This thankfully has nothing to do with anything structural. So, got to lean on Emerson Hancock for a couple of starts. He hasn't really found true success at the big league level. 15 starts total, a 4.71 ERA, 5.42 FIP, but reportedly has a new pitch, according to Ryan Divish of the Seattle Times. It's basically a sweeper, and it's been looking good for him this spring training. He struck out 9 of 27 batters that he's faced so far, and Divish continuing to write that sweeper essentially aligns with his low arm slot and movement profile, and that at least potentially could enhance his effectiveness against right-handed hitters, and right-handed hitters have torched him so far for an 837 OPS in his career. And on top of that sweeper that he's added to his arsenal, he has upped his fastball velocity. Usually he's sitting around 92 or 93. Emerson Hancock reportedly has his fastball up over 96. So a couple of positives there to lean on. And once again, not thinking that George Kirby's going to be out that long, but hey, gives Emerson Hancock a couple of chances at the major league level, really to show Dan Wilson and Pete Woodworth what he can do. And if these new pitches and this new velocity has transformed him into somebody that can be a consistent major league pitcher, that can actually be a good major league pitcher. He's kind of that faux sixth starter now, but some success here could really vault him into serious consideration. I mean, possibly on the trade market from other teams. But they do need him to succeed, even if it is just a couple of starts, because the Mariners, frankly, don't have many other options beyond Hancock. They got like Jonathan Diaz. He made that spot start last year for Seattle. And I Bleav had a few relief appearances. And I think they had like one other guy making a spot start. I don't know if it was like Tommy Malone on their roster again. I can't quite remember off the top of my head, but they don't really have like that veteran sitting down at AAA that they can call up for a spot start and then remove him immediately from the 40-man roster. And Jonathan Diaz isn't on the 40-man roster right now. So yeah, they need Emerson Hancock to succeed in those couple of starts in Kirby's place. And because they don't have room for injuries or errors on the hitting side of things, that makes Hancock's performance even more essential to Seattle getting off on the right foot. This is what happens when you claim your team already has the assets to compete at an elite level while refusing to spend any money on glaring needs. It's a team sitting on a house of cards after Kirby's injury, guys. And that leads me to the final story of this podcast. Yikes. After Justin Turner completely blasted Mariners ownership with some very true statements. And honestly, the most true statements I think I've heard a player publicly throw out about a team, either like in a long time or ever. I'm really trying to remember like how often a former player, while he's still in the league for that matter, just goes off on a team and on ownership. I mean, appreciate Justin Turner vindicating Mariners fans with those comments of his, but Jerry Dipoto, after Justin Turner called it absurd that the Mariners ownership was not adding talent in a time where they have a generational pitching staff that could literally put them in the World Series if they just spent a little money. Well, team president Jerry Dipoto responded by eating it again, making up another word salad. Yeah, he believes he is smarter than everybody else. He really does. It's getting so frustrating, Mariners fans. He is twisting himself into a freaking pretzel more and more with each new interview that he's throwing out there. I mean, this quote, truly, I could say hello, Dipoto said, and it would really turn into a thing like now, right now, unquote. Yeah, Jerry, you could, but it's not why you think it is. It's not because everything you say is dumb. It's because of these things that you refuse to acknowledge. God, This latest interview infuriated me. And I'm sure it did a lot of other Mariners fans before, unfortunately, the Seattle Seahawks kind of took over the news cycle. And I feel for you, Seattle Seahawks fans. It's been a rough one. You see DK Metcalf demand a trade, and then he's gone. You see Geno Smith all of a sudden in the dark of night traded to the Las Vegas Raiders, really shockingly, really surprisingly. And, I mean, you got your quarterback now. I'm taping this after Sam Darnold officially signed with the Seattle Seahawks. But, yeah, I would say Jerry Dipoto's lucky after this interview with the New York Times and The Athletic. He did it with Sam Blum. And then the next day, all this other Seattle news took over the news cycle. But I'm sure before that, and as was I, before that, a lot of Mariners fans were infuriated with what Jerry had to say. He managed to sound even more out of touch than I thought that he actually was. I mean, mind you, this article ends with Dipoto saying that he, quote, knows he's going to get roasted, end quote. So Dipoto already knows he's getting a strong response for basically anything that he says from fans, yet he keeps trying to explain why he knows best anyways. All right, let's get into, I've got two major quotes here that irked me. Let's get into them. This first quote is talking about Jerry Dipoto's 54% comment, basically saying that teams that win 54% of the time year to year end up in the World Series more often than not, and telling fans that he was essentially doing fans a favor by asking them to be patient. This is in response to that, to Sam Blum of The Athletic. Said, people obviously didn't understand the way that I expressed it. My guess is that 98% of people didn't actually listen to it. They just read it off a tweet. Well, I did listen to your 54% comment, but let's continue. It is what it is the quote from Dipoto. Maybe they wouldn't have understood it any better had they heard the whole thing. And that's on me for poorly communicating what I think is a simple idea. It's not about the idea, Jerry. Once again, I listened to the full damn press conference. And he sounded like he was telling fans, essentially, it's a bad idea to go pay proven talent in free agency because spending money like that will essentially keep your organization from developing talent and put your team into a position that could send you into irrelevancy faster than ever, something like that. Like, am I in the ballpark here, essentially saying that spending too much money can hamstring your future? Really, Jerry? I ain't seen that in Los Angeles with the Dodgers. How many division titles have they won with Dave Roberts since he's been there? What, 10, 11, 12? 2 World Series now? The Rangers going from losing 100 games to winning the World Series in less than 2 seasons because they spent money? I think we all know that cash can be your friend. It doesn't have to be your enemy if you use it correctly. But instead of focusing on the dollars, you're focusing on the cents, Mariners organization. And Jerry, you just can't admit that the Mariners owner in John Stanton or Chris Larson or whichever one or both, they're cheap, giant wussies who refuse to take any risks. And this last quote had me absolutely screaming reading this article. Jerry goes on to tell Sam Blum, I don't want to continue to constantly apologize to people for not winning the World Series in 1979, 89, 99. I understand the history of the Mariners. We can't erase 48 years. What we can focus on is our game tomorrow. You don't get it, dude. It's not 99 that we're pissed about. We're pissed about your constant promises until, about 2022 that you were going to spend money on generational talent and free agency. I personally am mad that your claim about payroll going up is only going up by a marginal amount. It's going up essentially by the letter of the definition, the letter of the law. Yeah, 154 million is technically more than 152 million. That is an accurate statement, but it's not the one that fans think that you're making. And it's not the one I think you're making when you're telling us that you're increasing spending. We all know there's more than one way to skin a cat. We've been talking about how to get to the World Series and what the most successful way is to do it for a long time here in Seattle. And they actually have the opportunity on their freaking doorstep, laid out on a silver platter. And And this plan seems to be like what the Mariners need to do, seems to be obvious to almost every decent mind in baseball. Almost every single smart person in baseball agrees how they need to execute this. Ride the generational pitching staff that you have and supplement your freaking lineup led by Julio, led by Cal, that you've developed with one or two high impact and big name professional hitters. That's it. That's the only way that they're going to win the World Series in Seattle. And until Jerry admits that that's what the Mariners organization needs to do, fans are going to continue to be upset every time he opens his mouth. John Stanton needs to understand that success is right in front of him if he takes it seriously. Don't grab at it with your pinky finger, bro. Grab it by the horns and hold on tight. We are tired of watching this team do just enough to be in the mix, to quote Dipoto. He says, as of the start of spring training, well, projections say that the Mariners are in the mix. Stop it, Jerry. This team has the opportunity to be in the World Series, not just in the mix. This organization could be in the World Series if you just went for it. But you won't. God, they just keep digging their heels in. And that's going to do it for this episode of Bleav In Mariners. I think I need to get out of here before I yell anymore. Excited to watch the rest of this week in spring training. Excited to get to why I personally love Ryan Bliss at second base, why I hope he's getting 400 at bats for them this season. Still got a theory about the Mariners offense that I need to get out there. And we've got to look at the starting pitching staff and the rest of the Mariners lineups as well. And remember, really appreciate everybody that's checked out this podcast on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, and on Bleav In Mariners YouTube as well. We're doing a giveaway once we get to 100 subscribers on YouTube and 100 5-star ratings on Apple Podcasts. We're getting close. We're at 77 subscribers right now on YouTube. And when we get to 100, we're going to give away an Andres Munoz Topps rookie autographed card. Really excited to give that away to a Mariners fan. And once I hit 100 subscribers, 100 5-star ratings on Apple Podcasts, I've got a 2019 Topps Transcendent Edgar Martinez autograph that I'm going to give away. We'll do a live stream. We'll do like a live game watch together or something to give those away. And really appreciate everybody that wants to join the community and excited to get to that point and be doing some live streams with everybody, get to know others in the content creator community for the Mariners and in the audience out there as well. Appreciate everybody tuning in. Keep those tridents up, Mariners fans. See you soon.